we do need to talk about one other thing for these fixed rate mortgages. And lenders look at data, past history, and they realize that people who make less than a 20% down payment are more likely to default on their loans. So basically stop paying their loans. And so because of this data, a lot of lenders require anybody who has less than a 20% down payment to get private mortgage insurance. And what that is something additional that you have to pay, basically to pay the lender back should you default. Okay, so it's basically an insurance policy like you have for your car. If you were to wreck your car, that insurance policy would pay for that replacement. Well, this private mortgage insurance works in a similar way. If somebody were to default on their loan, the private mortgage insurance would pay what the person still owed on that loan, any loss. So having less than a 20% down payment means that you are going to end up spending more each month for your loan payment. But getting 20% of the house price is expensive. So a lot of people do end up getting private mortgage insurance. Typically, that PMI will disappear once you have enough equity in your house for that 20% mark. So sometimes it's like 5 or so years for a lot of people. So PMI, it's a small percentage, but it does add up. So here, if we are getting a PMI of 0.65% on a loan amount for $325,000, how much is that going to add to the payment? So to calculate that, you just need to take that interest rate times the loan amount, and that tells us that we're looking at an additional $2,112.50. And this is annual, so you're going to be paying that 0.65% annually. So divide by 12, you're going to pay an extra $176 on your mortgage. And that really does add up over time. There's a few other fees that we have to consider when we're looking at mortgages. We have loan origination fees and what's called points. So your loan origination fee is just this fee that helps cover the cost to the lender of going through this whole process of starting up a loan. Okay, there's people involved, you have to pull a lot of credit, and there's risk assessment that's done. It costs people time and money, so they will charge you a fee there. Now, that fee also can sometimes be used to verify your assets, that you really do have the money that you say you do, your income, your employment history, and all sorts of other factors. Okay, the bank is not just going to give anybody $200,000 or $300,000. Okay, they're going to make sure that you are responsible enough and can pay that money back. So you have that first fee just to make sure that you are a credible person. And that's typically between 0.5% and 1% of the loan amount. Now, there's a lot of factors that influence your interest rates on mortgages. And there's this discount point, or sometimes just called a point. These are fees that may be required of a borrower. And they use the word points, but it's really just percent of the loan amount. So 1 point's 1% of the loan amount. Now, you can buy down the mortgage interest rate by agreeing to a loan with more points. So basically, you pay more up front, but then you'll have a lower interest rate. So paying down a mortgage interest rate using points, you do need to be careful with making that decision. There's a lot of factors to consider, and one in particular is how long you plan to keep the loan. So let's say you plan to live in a house for 5 to 10 years. Well, you're not going to be paying that loan for 30 years, so you may not want to pay as much up front because ultimately you're going to be selling this house before it really helps out. Whereas if you're planning on living that home for 30 years and paying off that loan over time, then you might want a lower interest rate because it'll save you money in the long term. So you really need to do a careful consideration of how long you plan on living in a home. And most experts will agree if you're not planning on living somewhere at least 3 to 5 years, that it's not typically a good idea to buy a home because the upfront cost in purchasing a home is so much, it's quite expensive. And so you are sometimes in a better shape just to rent a house. But there's a lot of factors that you really have to consider with your situation. So how can we figure out the impact on points on a loan? Well, let's consider this loan for $328,000 with an interest rate of 3.25%, with a 0.75 point or an interest rate of 3% with 1.65 points. So the question ultimately becomes, if you choose the second loan, how many months will it take to recoup this additional cost? And that's how you can decide, like, am I going to stay in this home long enough for this? So let's figure out the difference in cost. So the $328,000 loan, that had a 1.65 points, and then the other loan had a 0.75 points. So the difference in the upfront cost is $2,952. So that's basically what we're comparing. Get those upfront point cost. So if you do the lower interest rate, you're going to have an additional $2,952 in fees to get that lower interest rate. And so now we really need to see, how much does that interest rate really make a difference in the payment? So let's go to Excel to do that. I already had my workbook from the last question open, so I was able just to change the amounts and get everything to auto calculate. So the loan amount is $328,000, and we're going to look at the 3.25% rate. Oh, and that is not 260, it's a 30-year loan, I'm assuming. So we have 360, not 260. There we go. So there's the payment amount. And if we wanted, we can just create a new column with our 3% loan, 360, and we can calculate that payment. The rate divided by 12, number of periods, the negative present value, comma 0. And what's the difference there? We can calculate that by doing the more expensive one minus the less expensive one. So he's going to save $44.62 a month. So that's how much you save by paying that additional $2,952 up front. So to answer the question, how long will it take to recoup? You take that additional cost and divide by the monthly difference. So here, 2,952 divided by 44.62 is going to take you about 66 months to recoup this additional amount. So that's about 5.5 years, or it's exactly 5.5 years. If you think you're going to be in that house for at least 5.5 years, then you should pay the higher points for the lower interest rate. If you think you might move before 5 points, then before 5.5 years, then it's not worth it.